on the crew, they will have been at the heart of organising it in the outset. And within the production department, depending on what size of production, you will either have, so you'll have your producer, then you'll have the line producer or production manager, and they really are in charge of the budget. And the budget really being the line producer or production manager, it's a very creative role because you're constantly having to juggle. So you'll start off on, say, 6 weeks out, you'll start off with a budget of X, and it will be divvied up into, you know, X amount going to camera, whatever. And then as you get closer to filming, then things will happen. You'll go on your technical recce's and suddenly you discover that you need to build a big bit of scaffolding, or suddenly the director wants to have a really kind of fancy, complicated helicopter shot or whatever. So you're constantly kind of ducking and diving within the budget to see where you can free up money. And usually it's a compromise. So it may be, say if the director wants a helicopter shot, maybe they need to have less extras or whatever. So that line producer, production manager role is hugely important. And then you'll have a coordinator, production coordinator, who is doing the call sheets. I don't know whether you've come across call sheets, but the call sheet is basically a bit of information that is sent out every day to every member of the crew, so everybody knows what time to be on set, where they're going and all that kind of stuff. And on Outlander, because of the enormity of the, I suppose, the amount of actors, they actually have a transport and accommodation coordinator, and their job is literally just organising everybody's travel arrangements, whether that's from America, London, in Scotland, and then making sure that all the hotels are booked for both cast and crew. And then you'll usually in Outlander, you'll have at least a couple of assistants who are supporting the rest of the production department, and then the runner, who is the person that just does everything at Outlander. It could be that they are doing the lunch run every day. It could be that Outlander supplies to every different department. You get kind of like tea and coffee and that you can make yourselves, and fresh fruit and things like that. So maybe you'll use the Asda delivery arrives and you're kind of deploying all the coffee and tea and fruit around all the different departments, and just really whatever is needed. Or maybe you're helping the script department photocopying hundreds of scripts. Or I was interviewing yesterday for locations trainees, so it was one of the assistants and the runner who was helping to organise the actual, all the trainees' interviews. So that's the production department. Then you've got the accounts department, who actually, in conjunction, very close conjunction with the production department, manage all the money side of things. On a small shoot, that could be one person. On a shoot like Outlander, it's about, I think there's probably about 10 of them in that department. It's just running the payroll for hundreds of people is consuming in itself. So they're dealing with paying your salary, again, working with production to juggle things about within the budget, and dealing with any petty cash or kind of those kind of things. And locations, I know you've talked about that a bit, but again, at Outlander, quite a big department. You've got what's called a supervising location manager. So they are the chief person who will be the person liaising directly with director, production, and kind of liaising about any of the new locations, and the production designer as well. But then at Outlander, you've got about 3 location managers below that, and then a unit manager, and then a whole bundle of location assistants and marshals. So it's a huge department and quite complicated. And I think with COVID, it's going to be even more complicated, because I think one of the big issues is going to be that every different department, normally when you go on location, you can all sit on a dining bus and eat lunch together. You can be in communal areas, and it's, you don't need to have that many communal areas, even for a big crew like Outlander. Cast can maybe share caravans, various things like that. But clearly with COVID and with 2 metre distancing, that's just going to be so blinking complicated. So I think locations are going to be stretched hugely this year. And locations is really a combination of creativity. So the location scout, the person that's finding the locations, is, it's a hugely creative job. You're trying to interpret what a director and what the script kind of says, and often actually what the script and the director kind of initially think they want might be very different from what they actually want in reality. But you also need to be finding locations that can logistically work for a huge crew or even a small crew. And then you've got a combination within the locations department of immense creativity, but also huge practical and organisational skills. And also, people within that department need to be able to stand outside in the torrential rain all day and lift very heavy equipment a lot, and actually just be really resilient, because you are always the person that's on set before anybody. So you might be on set from 5 o'clock in the morning until kind of wrap normally, which is kind of 7 or 8 o'clock at night. You're also a real ambassador in that in the locations department for the production, because you will not just be liaising with the cast and crew and dealing with people who, crew members who are kind of pissed off because they've got to park, I don't know, further away than a cast member or whatever. But you're also dealing with the public. So imagine if a huge, maybe some of you have experienced this, if a crew's filmed near you, some people don't mind a film crew outside their door, but a lot of people get really fed up, if they can't park or whatever. So you're the person liaising with the public, and also you're the person liaising with the police, with the council, to kind of get, maybe you need to get a road closure because maybe there's a big kind of stunt happening in the middle of it. So imagine Fast and Furious, when they closed down the whole of Glasgow City Centre. I think that was last year or the year before that. Just the organisation from the locations department to close down that size of kind of, all those roads, hugely immense. And then things like the city chambers, there were weddings still going on in the city chambers. So imagine you're in the middle of stunts, the director, the AD is kind of called, they're about to turn over. And then you've suddenly got a wedding party, either trying to get into their wedding or getting out. So locations deal with all of that. Press and publicity, hugely important. So, especially with a show like Outlander that's got fans around the world, making sure that there's, enough stuff, going out to feed that fan base, especially actually given COVID and given that we've been pushed back so far. So if you look on Instagram and all that kind of stuff, there's quite a lot of kind of stuff being fed out. So for instance, it was Katrina Balfe's birthday yesterday, so she plays one of the main characters, so there was stuff on Instagram about her. So that would have been the press and publicity department doing that. And they're not there every day of filming, but they're quite often there, taking pictures, dealing with, people visiting set, although that won't be happening so much now in COVID times. Also dealing with all the huge amount of fan attention to the main characters. Quite often, Outlander has got a fan base who are very, I don't quite know the right way to put it, but they are very keen to be on location whenever they can. And so they actually, stalks, maybe not the right word, but they are, they're very on it, and quite often will turn up at a location. So press and publicity need to be right across that to make sure that, photographs aren't being taken, so that, stuff isn't being leaked. So that's quite a complicated job. Then there's the construction department. The majority of sets and interior locations that you will see on Outlander are built by the construction department. They are hugely, hugely creative. And within that department, you've got painters, you've got plasterers, you've got the chippies, you've got riggers. So last year we had a guy who used to work on the oil rigs. He's now working in construction. So every job that you can imagine, if you can imagine somebody building a house, you've got every different kind of creative role in construction. And actually a lot of the stuff they do, like the plastering, I'm not going to be able to use the right terminology, but they're using skills that actually you don't kind of use anymore. So they're keeping a lot of old traditional ways of doing things alive just because it looks the most beautiful. Because with that, I think the advent of the advance of cameras and the detail that gets shown up, you know, it's just got to be absolutely perfect. Then you've got props. So you've got dressing props and standby props. So dressing props are the department who go in. So imagine if construction have built the set, then it's the dressing props that go in and put all the props and furniture into the location. And then it's the standby props who, when you're actually filming, are in charge of all the kind of hand props. So when I mean, say hand props, Claire, the main characters, one of the main characters, she's a medical person. So she has a medical kind of bag. So all the instruments within that, those would be props, and the props department, standby props, would be in charge of making sure that every time there was a scene that, or if they were doing multiple takes of scenes, that the props, medical props, were in exactly the same place and would be kind of looking after them afterwards. Then special effects. So special effects are the people who do just a multiplicity of things. So it could be the guns and gunshots. It could be in conjunction with armory. It could be any fires you have, any explosions. It could be, last season they had somebody who was being feathered and tarred, so they had to make the dummy and then, you know, make it look as if it was a human person being feathered and tarred. So anything that's kind of, yeah, kind of like explosion-y, fire, that kind of related thing. So often people in special effects are people who maybe are interested in engineering or mechanics, because often you are finding a mechanical kind of solution to do something really creative. And there's often a confusion between makeup effects and special effects. So makeup effects and prosthetics is a completely different department. The greens department, I think we touched on before, that's basically people dealing with anything to do with vegetables, flowers, greenery, anything like that. So whether that's the you know, stuff in Jamie and Claire's garden at their house, or whether it's hiding a telegraph pole, or whether it's you know, given that you're on location in Scotland and Dublin for America, maybe there's a shrub or plant or tree that isn't actually native to America, so covering that up. Again, that's a very, very much outdoorsy job, kind of pretty 24/7. Then the art department, so they design in conjunction with the producer and the director the look and locations, the look of the show. So they'll design and do all the plans for the sets that the construction department build. And the art department have a, you know, multiplicity of kind of different roles within that department. You've got people doing graphics. So that could be, say, if I think it was in season 2, Jamie was in France and ran a printing company. So the graphics team would have done all the research around what would have been authentically printed in the 1700s, and they would produce those kind of prints. And if there's any, I think in the last season there were one of the characters, Murta, there was kind of a poster because he was being, you know, I think he was being wanted to be arrested. So it would be the graphics department again who would research to find out what kind of poster would have been appropriate in the 1700s, and then they would reproduce that. Then you've got concept design, and that's kind of quite comparatively new. It used to be that when you started a new show or when you were designing a new location, you would hand draw, so that you know, the director could, you know, get a sense of what it was you were thinking of. And now this is all done, you know, with kind of fancy stuff that you'll probably know much more about than I do, but using stuff like Maya and whatever, and just coming up with beautiful concepts, visual concepts, and more, even before a show gets commissioned, the people who have got the money and are, you know, thinking about commissioning a show, they might ask for quite complicated concept designs to actually understand what the show is going to look like. So that's a really interesting job. And if you're into kind of graphics and that kind of side of things, I think that's a really interesting area to look at, because there aren't many people who can do that. Then you've got drafting. So those are the people who do the really meticulous, detailed drafts of the set design. So kind of, in fact, we've just brought somebody in who has got an architectural background. So she can just she'll be sitting every day just doing really meticulous drawings. Then we've got set deck, who work in conjunction with props and the art department. So they will, so you've got your set, your blank house, and then the set decorators are the ones that then will kind of source all the furniture and fabrics, and you know, liaising with all the prop houses. There are prop houses in Glasgow and London who have just got like magical emporiums full of, you know, every prop you can imagine. And sometimes actually, if you, I mean, some of you may do this, you can sometimes notice I don't know, say a kind of sofa that was used in X film that you'll then see popping up in another film. So the set decorating department do that, but then they also have kind of a subset, which is the set deck painting team, and they're the people who will be, say if there's I don't know, a cart that has just been built now, then the set deck team will be the people who distress the cart to make it look as if it actually comes from the 1700s, or it might be a table or chairs, and they kind of will age it, paint it the colours that are appropriate. So that's a really kind of meticulous area. And then the prop making department, they can be doing anything from making the standing stones. If you've seen the show, the standing stones, those are actually made. Last season there was fields of wheat, and they made all the wheat shafts. Or they could be making specific kind of, you know, maybe smaller props, or maybe, you know, things like, I can't now think off the top of my head, but maybe if there's body parts, like somebody's heart or something like that, then they would be making that. So that's a really kind of amazing department. Then costume, again, we touched on this before, I think, that costume at Outlander, they make pretty much all of their costumes, certainly for the lead characters. So you can imagine there's a workroom full of amazing seamstresses, hand sewing, machine sewing, designing, fitting. So really like a fashion couture house, I think would be almost the way to describe it. Hugely creative and just stunning what they do. Again, every department at Outlander, a lot of what they are doing is meticulous research, because everything needs to be completely accurate. So a lot of time and effort goes into dealing with that. With Outlander, you've got a breakdown and dye department. So that's an actual department where you've got the fabrics coming in, and they are dyed to the to be the correct colours, and then broken down so that you're not seeing on screen an outfit that looks as if it's never been worn before. So that takes quite a lot of skill to do that. And then you've got the craft department who make all the buttons, the bonnets, anything that's just the tiny details. There are, there's a department of people actually making those things, again, using techniques which I think in many ways have kind of, in the main, kind of slightly gone out of fashion. but really, really amazing. Then you've got makeup and hair. So, you've got people who are experts with wigs, most of the wigs are hired in, and the fitting of wigs, just in general, just to make sure that it's the right look and fit, but then on a day-to-day basis is really complicated. And then the makeup, there isn't, I think season 2 where they were in France, perhaps the makeup was more extreme, but it may look in kind of, more recent seasons that there's not much makeup, but actually making people look, people who live, now, making them look as if, they are of the 1700s, with different hairstyles and all that kind of stuff. And actually just, I suppose, weathering, people who maybe have got quite pale complexions, but making them look as if they, are out in the weather, actually takes quite a lot of skills. So that's a big department, important department. Then you have got the camera department, which I'm sure this is something you've talked about quite a lot. So you'll have the director of photography who, along with the director, producer, designer, locations is hugely key to kind of coming up with the look of the show. On Outlander, you'll definitely have at least 2 cameras. The DOP will be liaising with the lighting department, and then there will be assistants kind of working with each camera. So there'll be the first camera person, then the second, and then a variety of trainees, helping each camera. And then you've got the video assist people who are the people who set up all the monitors coming from the cameras so the director can see what's being recorded, but also so that makeup, the script supervisor, all the people who need to actually be able to be seeing what the camera's looking at can see. Script supervisor is the person liaising directly with the director on continuity. So often, as you'll probably know, you don't film in a kind of scene by scene sequence. So the script supervisor will be able to refer back to their notes and say, well, actually, X was sitting here and Y was standing there, or those props should be there. But normally the script supervisor has got a really good understanding about how sequences and shots and scenes can be cut together. So they'll have a really good understanding of the editorial process. So they're a hugely important kind of person on set. Sound, I'm sure you've talked about. So that would be sound recordist, various boom ops, and potentially some assistants. Lighting department, again, hugely important. You'll have your gaffer who's in charge, and then you'll have your best boy who's the next person down, and then you'll have a variety of sparks. Assistant directors are, as it says on the tin, they're the people that assist the director. So you'll have your first assistant director who will be working very closely with all the other heads of department, and they will break down the script and they will schedule the script. So they've basically got the really difficult job of making the script work in the days that have been budgeted, which can be a really complicated juggle. And then once you're actually filming on set, the first AD will run the set. So they will be the person calling turnover and cut. They will be liaising directly with the director, if there's kind of any last minute changes. So for instance, on a fellow production that's filming at the moment, they've had a situation where a cast member has tested positive, so they've had to rejig completely. So that would be the first liaising with the director, with production, all the heads of departments, to kind of think, okay, we thought we were going to be doing this today, we can't do that, so what can we do instead? And then the first AD has various members of his or her team. The second, they will be the person who will be working on the call sheet with production, working on call times for all the actors, working out. So if Jamie, I don't know if you've seen any of the episodes where Jamie has had, basically there's a sequence in season 1 where Jamie is very badly whipped and he has really significant scars on his back. So in order for Jamie to go through makeup to get those scars, prosthetics put on, takes a huge amount of time. So if that's been, if that scene's been shot, the second AD will be liaising with makeup and hair to say, right, what time do we need to get him in? And then they'll kind of organise the driver to pick them up at whatever time it is, 4 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning. And then you've got third assistant director or directors who are on set, who will be carrying out a lot of the, so the first will liaise directly with the third. The third might be the person that's putting all the extras in position. So if you can imagine a sequence and you've got 10 extras, 20 extras, 30 extras, it's the third AD that will actually be positioning them and making sure that they're exactly where they should be. On Outlander, they actually have a whole department that's to do with extras. And then you'll have floor runners who are doing a variety of things. Maybe they're kind of bringing tea and coffee for the actors. They may be bringing the actors from their caravan or from wherever their green room is on the set. There may be locking off different bits of the set. So even when you're in the studio, if you're filming and you're turning over, you'll need to make sure that anybody else is not coming onto the set. So you need to have somebody positioned to stop people kind of entering. So it's usually the floor runner or runners, or sometimes a location assistant, or sometimes a location marshal who'll be the person locking off the set. Then you've got the drivers who bring cast and kind of maybe the heads of departments to and from home to set and location. And these drivers are really important people because they are, so if you can imagine a cast member, maybe they've not slept well, maybe they're upset, maybe they've got a hangover, maybe whatever. Actually, how the driver behaves and interacts with that individual can actually really help or hinder how that cast member is when they actually get to the set. So actually the driver is not by any means a menial member of the crew. It's a really good, important member of the crew. And often there's somebody that's hugely trusted by the cast member or the HOD, maybe their confidant. So actually a really important member of the team. Catering. Again, catering might sound not that important, but hugely important. I would say, one of the biggest indicators of a happy crew and cast is a crew and cast that are well fed and feeling, that it's the right food they're getting. I remember years ago working on a TV series called Lorna Doone, and we were up in the hills, out in location a huge amount of time, and we had a brilliant caterer. He was a new caterer to film and TV, and he kept making lovely things like miso soup and really fancy stuff, but it was completely insubstantial. And actually what you needed if you're outstanding in the middle of a moor for 12 hours a day is mince and tatties or the vegetarian equivalent, not kind of fancy food. So I think having caterers who understand, what the needs of a crew are is hugely important. Then you've got security, again, not a menial position, really, really important. Again, a bit like the locations, more junior members of the locations team, they are often the people who are first to meet a member of the public or an issue. So their ability to respond politely but appropriately is really important. And then you've got post-production. Again, this is probably something you know lots about, but within that, hugely, so you've got your key editors, then you'll have your assistant editors, then you'll have your dubbing editors and assistants, and any kind of effects that's being added in. So that's a huge department, which I won't go into detail, but that could be something that you might want me to bring somebody from Outlander to come and chat to you about. So that's a real tour through. So I don't know if there's any questions that have come in.
Yes, Sarah. Yeah, there's a couple of questions come in. I'll just read them out here. Sean's asking, how long would the training program last for, and what would happen after the training has been completed?
So the training lasts for, so for instance, the location trainee that we were interviewing today and yesterday, they would start in December and they would go through to August. So we're going to be filming from January to August. So the majority of trainees would be on for that period of time. Some of the departments so we've already got our plasterer trainee and our painting trainee, so they are back up working at the moment. As our art department trainee and our concept design trainee, they've already started back. So it really depends on which department you're in as to which department, how much prep they have. So for instance, the first AD, the AD's department, well, the first is on for a few weeks before because they're doing the schedule. The third and the floor runners would only probably come on the week before, so the trainee would only come on the week before you start filming. But somebody in our department would come on a long time before. And I'm looking at the questions too, Alan. So are there any departments we can't do? Yes. It changes every year. So that will be a combination of looking at where there's a real skill shortage. So for instance, this year we identified that there was a real skill shortage across Scotland for concept artists. So that's why we've added that in. And it depends which departments feel happy to take somebody. For whatever reason, a department might feel that, maybe they've got people within their department that they are stepping up, so maybe they would worry that having another very junior member, and when I say stepping up, that means, maybe the third is stepping up to be a second, and maybe the floor runners are stepping up to be third, so they might feel that they're doing enough training. So it really depends kind of every year. So the absolute wish is that we do employ people after the season finishes. The absolute ambition is not just to bring trainees on and then kind of abandon them. If they're good, the absolute wish is that they will be employed again by Outlander. So for instance, we've got already, I know that the 2 construction trainees from last year are back on this year. And all the wardrobe trainees who are available from last year are back on. The Greens trainee is back on. And so our hope is that as people come back into departments, come back into prep, they will be bringing back the trainees from last year. But clearly that definitely is dependent on whether you have been any good or not. Part of my role as a training manager throughout is to performance manage and feedback. So hopefully if there are issues, the trainee will be made aware of that. So there's opportunity to for them to kind of improve and change. And clearly it's a two-way thing as well. There might be issues that the trainee's having that then it's for me to speak to their department so that they can sort things out as well. But no, our wish is that anybody who comes on as a trainee to Outlander either comes back to Outlander or who can go into the wider world. I do help where I can. So, some trainees don't want help and manage to get on with it themselves. Others, keep in touch. So I'm there if, I suppose the only caveat is I'm only employed part-time by Outlander, so there's only so much time that I have, but I absolutely try and make time. So when filming starts, so we're hoping to start the first week in January. And yeah, the training would be once you've finished your HNC or HND, because basically we need to have trainees who are available kind of 5 days a week. I am talking to Alan and Kim about, could there be something that we could do for maybe a few people to come and get a bit of more of a sense of Outlander, but that's kind of a work in progress. But for the actual traineeship, yeah, you would need to be available 5 days a week. 2021, I don't know the answer to that. I guess it would be probably towards the end of next year. What hours would trainees generally do? Actually, I can tell you that. So it depends. So for people who are on the shooting crew, so that's the actual the crew that is with, is filming, you would do probably about 50 to 57.5 hours a week. Sometimes it could be longer than that, but what we try and do with the trainees on the shooting crew is then give you time back in lieu. So it could be that if, maybe 1 week it's a really long week, really long hours, then maybe we would say the following week, actually you can come in a couple of hours late that morning. For costumes, say costume who are working in the workroom, it's kind of shorter hours, so it's maybe between 47.5 to 55 a week. And then everybody else, like production production and others, it kind of construction, it kind of ducks and dives between, between the kind of 47 to 55. So it depends, and you get paid a different rate depending on the hours that you do. Is there a training scheme for casting assistant? No, there isn't. But if that's something you're interested in, then I could certainly get you information about casting people in Scotland, and you let me know if that's a particular interest. Drivers. So we've got a transport department. So I think a lot of the drivers have been there, year in, year out. So I don't know, if I'm honest, quite this year whether there are drivers needed, but again, I could find that out. I think the specific skills needed would be clearly that you're a good driver, that you're diplomatic, that you can keep information confidential. You might have somebody in your car who's having a confidential call, that you drive safely, that you communicate clearly. So if you've been held up, that you communicate to the crew or cast member where you are, and that you keep in touch with the transport captain to let them know where you are. So yeah, good at driving, diplomatic, confidential, and good at communicating.
And good at turning up on time as well, I suppose.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I think the big thing about turning up on time, it's not about turning up on time, it's turning up in plenty of time.
Yes.
So being there, I would say a good kind of 20 minutes, half an hour before the actual time you're told to be there.
Can I ask a question? I suppose Sean's got a question to ask as well, but I suppose you touched upon it 3 or 4 questions ago when trainees, what are some of the things they fall down on in terms of their training? Where do they kind of fall short, I suppose, in terms of being able to be successful going through into and finishing the training scheme?
Timekeeping. People, not everybody does understand the importance to be there on time, and clearly we all understand that things happen. You might get stuck in a traffic jam. You might, if you've got a child, there might be childcare issues, whatever. But I think it's about communicating if there's an issue, and people don't always understand that. Resilience. A lot of people can't cope with the days, the length of days, and find it really exhausting. And find being out and about and the actual hard physical work that a lot of the roles are, they find it difficult. And sometimes there is a lot of standing about, whether that be in the studio or out on location, and people can't cope with that. Arrogance. I think often people think they know more than they actually do know. And often people, and I'm sure this doesn't apply to any of you guys, but people come out of courses and they want to be a director. They've maybe directed a short film, and they think they know it all. And it's a funny business still mentality. It's quite hierarchical. So actually, when somebody's arrogant and thinks they know it all, that person will be, the rest of the team won't be impressed by them. But at the same time, if you can demonstrate you're a team player, that you're willing just to get on with the most menial task, then you will be supported to move as quickly as you're capable, kind of up through the ranks. So it's, so arrogance is a big thing. What else? I think one of the big issues, actually, and which is not anybody's fault, is how challenging the industry is to people with care responsibilities. And that's something that I'm really kind of, there's a whole bundle of us trying to kind of do what we can to kind of change that, because what's happening is we're often losing really, really talented people, whether they be male or female, you know, who've got care responsibilities for kids or parents or whoever. And it means they can't do the long hours. So really trying to find solutions to that. What else? I think those are probably the main things that are the barriers. Well, I think, and this is a difficult one, but actually, if you've got a kind of negative and quite dour disposition, if you're kind of one of those people that moan and groan all day long, I think that you might be brilliant at your job, but are you somebody that the rest of the team want to be around? Probably not, you know. So I guess in that situation, you could have two people that are brilliant at your job, at their jobs, but one's very negative and moans and one just gets on with it. Then the person who just gets on with it is likely to be the person that's employed the next time round. That's absolutely not to say that if there are issues that you shouldn't raise them. Absolutely, that's important, but it's about learning how to do that and when to do that. And I suppose then the other extreme of that is people who are maybe over exuberant and don't know how to read a room and don't know when to keep their mouth shut. So, you know, maybe burst onto set, maybe not understanding that, you know, that the cast are rehearsing, you know, maybe, and just kind of a disruptive. So I think it's about having that maturity to know when to have a laugh, when not to have a laugh, when to raise a problem, when not to raise a problem. So just actually being quite self-aware and just being quite aware of just how to read a room and how to behave.
Thank you, Sarah.
So review meetings. Yes, so there are review meetings, not constantly, but regularly. And if a trainee needs more support, then absolutely. So there could be somebody who's got, significant mental health issues. So maybe I would need to kind of check in with them much, much more regularly. Maybe somebody has a bereavement or a challenge from home, you know, so whatever. So we kind of, I ebb and flow kind of really to fit the trainee as to what they need. And I guess the next bit of that question, Sean, about which department suits, I think that's one of the reasons that I'm engaging with you all, is to try and help that, because I am really aware that, you know, not everybody's got a clear, A, they don't know all the different kind of possibilities that are out there, and B, you might think you want to be in camera, but then you might decide you actually don't want to do that at all. So I guess that's what I'm trying to do, a bit more outreach work to try and help guide people. But often I think you come into the industry, I've ducked and dived across departments, and that's completely fine. I think what the big thing is that whatever you do it to your best ability. So for instance, we had a trainee who was in one department 2 years ago who is absolutely blinking brilliant, and that department would have them back and would promote them. But they've decided they want to go down a more creative route. So they've moved into the art department, into props. And what's really interesting to me is to know that even though they've made that decision to move from the previous department into props, their original department would have them back, you know, in a heartbeat, because they are so good at what they do. So I guess it's always about, you know, just being the best you can be. But people don't mind if you end up moving from department to department. But yeah, more outreach work needs to be done so that people know the different possibilities. So children, it's really difficult. Like I said earlier, I'm trying to kind of do what I can. I'm involved, not just at Outlander, but kind of, I'm part of a training alliance in Scotland, Back2 Vision, who are also part of that. I've got a big kind of push on to look at hours and look at job shares. You know, if somebody applied for a traineeship and, you know, was chosen, we would do whatever we could to work around that. But it still is, if you're with the shooting crew, it is complicated. But yeah, we need to work much harder to sort that out.
And to be fair, Sarah, I think it's not just the film and TV industry that have that problem as well. I think every industry has a problem with regards to supporting people with caring responsibilities. Yeah.
But it's, you know, it shouldn't put you off. And it's something that, you know, we should just keep talking about. No, I actually don't know the answer to that, but I'm sure, so this is the one from Graham. I'm sure that have been, I mean, what I do know is the sense of achievement. So last year, I know explicitly from one of the construction trainees who had built a specific bit of set that was heavily featured, and her excitement at actually seeing something that she had built on set. And then I know one of the costume trainees, her sense of pride from, she'd made specific buttons for a particular frock coat that was featured, and her sense of pride. So I know from the practical, you know, that side of things, you know, absolutely the influence that trainees have made. As far as actually influencing a scene or a shot for the better, I don't know, but I'm sure there will have been situations where, you know, whether it be the standby props trainee quietly saying to the art director, standby art director, you know, what about doing X? That would be better. Or whether it's about the trainee script supervisor saying to the script supervisor, X, you know, that's wrong and whatever. So there will be, or whether it be, you know, the production runner, you know, picking up the, I don't know, the lead writer, the showrunner, and chatting about a location or something that they went walk, you know, there could be a whole myriad of ways. So I'm sure there will be, because, you know, I think people at every stage, whether they be trainee, runner, assistant, they can and are influential. Any other questions?
Anybody got anything else?
Any departments that you are particularly interested in me getting either an ex-trainee or somebody from that department to come and talk to you?
I think in terms of what we are doing, Sarah, I think that it would be useful to have someone coming in from production side and also the technical side as well, from kind of what our emphasis in terms of what we are doing here with our students. Maybe look at a couple of roles within the production team and a couple of roles within the technical team, just to talk about, I suppose, the day-to-day running of what the job entails. I think that would be very useful for the students to hear kind of firsthand some of the really positive things and also the really challenging things. I don't want to see negative, because it's not negative, it's challenging. I think that for the potential trainees, I think they need to go in with their eyes wide open and be very aware that there are kind of quite some challenges that you've raised really well here, I think. So,
and I think probably the challenges is probably one of the most exciting things about working in film and TV. You know, you really do not know from day to day what's going to happen. And you have to be able to, I think people who do well in this industry are people who can, you know, in a split second can, think, okay, right, I was meant to be doing that, but actually I now need to be doing this. How do I manage that? How do I communicate? How do I problem solve? That scenario of a cast member testing positive. How do you deal with that? That ripples down into every single department, what costumes, what props, what locations, whatever. And it's about actually in that moment being able to think, okay, here we go, right, how can I deal with this calmly and constructively? But I think that's why I couldn't really work in any other industry, because I don't think I could cope with I'm not saying every job's monotonous, but I don't think I could cope with the knowing what I'm doing every day and being in the same place every day. I like that challenge of every day's different. And so, okay, so production, I think that's positive. So within technical, which particular areas?
I think
is it camera?
I think it would be maybe useful to have camera, lighting, maybe even, and maybe even someone coming in from post production, since we do a bit of post there as well.
And sound or not?
And I think sound would be great as well. Yeah, if we get sound. And I think from the production side, really looking at the logistics of running the production, the organisation side of things, which is something I find our students sometimes don't really pay either. They don't really pay much attention to it, or when they do, I don't think they place the importance that it really is, because ultimately for me, the production is, and the organisation of the thing itself is the most important part of the process.
100%, Alan. You're absolutely right. There's you could be the most amazing, DOP or director or whatever, but actually, if you can't get access to the location to film, if you can't, have transport to get you there, if there's not food organised or whatever. I think the organisational side of things is, critical and key. And also, production, I was doing some lectures for, there's a kind of short film thing at the moment called Short Circuit, and I was talking to the guys that are on that from a COVID perspective. And actually production are the people who can, you might have got your script all locked off, know exactly what you want to do, whatever. But with all the COVID restrictions, a lot of that is kind of up in the air, and production are the people that can help you, do what you creatively want to be doing in this new COVID situation. So 100%, I think everybody should spend time, in the production office. And in fact, we do that on Outlander. We give everybody a wee bit of a taster in the production office because of that. And yeah, it's you might think that the area that you are particularly interested in is the most important, but if you don't have a production office that's working well and efficiently, then you won't get to do what you want to do.
Brilliant, Sarah. Thanks for this. Listen, thank you. I'm aware that you're preparing for another meeting. I'd like to say thank you for coming on again and giving us a really great insight into the Outlander production and the various teams that are involved. And I think what hopefully the students are going to take away is the vastness of the roles and how different they are and how complementary they are. How it is literally one just big team all working towards the cause of making this content. And I suppose what's really interesting about Outlander is, and I suppose productions such as The Crown, is the level of detail that goes into these productions is absolutely phenomenal, and it's as a case study to study, to look at on their own merit. It's really important, that we're engaging and we're watching shows such as Outlander and The Crown because of the amount of work that's involved.
But even I think what's also fascinating is that even if you think about the way design and the way that design has evolved and fashion has evolved, even say in the last 10 years, you could say that show set in 2010 is also period. So actually the same attention to detail. I mean, it's perhaps more complicated if you're going back in time for your
historical, yeah.
But actually, you know, so much is period. So I think there's a film coming to Glasgow, I think imminently, about Tetris, and which I won't tell you more about it. You're going to have a look at it, but I think that must be set in the mid-70s, and that'll be fascinating just to see what kind of locations they can find that work for that period, and clearly what the kind of wardrobe and props and art department will be. So I will go, but I will try and set up for you over the coming weeks specific production, camera, lighting, post and sound. And what I'll maybe do is try and get maybe an ex-trainee or somebody who's at junior level, but then maybe more senior from each department.
Perfect.
In the meantime, if you've got any specific questions, please feed them to Kim and Alan, and I will try and answer as many of those as you can. So if you want, let's just assume we've got an ongoing dialogue over the coming months. So anything, you know, that crops up that, you know, whether it be Alan and Kim who've got a question about something, or whether it's any of you guys, then if I can help with it, then I will. And thank you for all the thank yous. I really appreciate that.
Brilliant. Thank you, Sarah.
Take care, and I'll see you at the next ones. I'll pop along.
Brilliant.
Whittling away. I'll be there just to see how they get on.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you, Sara.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.